Hey dudes, today we're talking about the black cards, and we're starting off with an interesting one. This is Balduvian Dead, an uncommon 2/3 creature that costs 3 and a black mana, so 4 mana total. It has an ability, you can pay 2 and a red mana and remove target summon card from your graveyard from the game to put a Graveborn token into play. Treat this token as a 3/1 black and red creature that can attack the turn it comes into play. Bury Graveborn token at end of turn. So this is very interesting. This is a pretty unique effect at the time. Not like completely they have done stuff like this. And it's interesting because it doesn't really synergize well with reanimator strategies, because normally you'd want to dump cards into your graveyard and pull out the strong ones. But this is interesting. It's a little mana intensive to actually be usable, but it's not awful. It's not very good. Even in limited, I often find this isn't very valuable. However, if you are in a situation where you are a more aggressive deck, if you haven't played this out and your opponent doesn't know you have one, you can make very aggressive trades that seem like they are in their favor, and just like kind of seem like you are just misplaying, basically. They'll take the more aggressive trades if it values them, and then you can use this, and you can activate this more than once per turn. So like if you manage to get the board mostly cleared, you can put this down, reuse resources, and swing in for game. So as a win condition, it is kind of interesting. I haven't actually managed to make that work, but I do think it is possible. It's interesting. I like this a lot. It's a very kind of a diversion from usual strategies, at least at the time, and it is a very interesting way of making extra use of resources you've already used. So I kind of like this card. It's not good, but it's interesting. And I guess a 2/3 for 4 mana is pretty bad. Yeah, that's pretty bad. If you're not making use of the ability, don't really do this, and it is difficult to make use of the ability because even if you can get the tokens out, there are a lot of creatures that can block this or block these tokens with very little issue. Like I said, there's definitely value to be had here. And if you go all in on this and play very aggressive and make aggressive trades, this can be valuable. So it's definitely, if you manage to get one or two of these and can build a black red aggro deck, which is not impossible, this is pretty decent. It's a pretty interesting and unique way to finish a game, and I appreciate that a lot. But there's not all that much to say here. It's a relatively unique design and it's interesting, but it's not good. It was illustrated by Mike Kimball, and the art is really, really fucking funny. It's very goofy in a way that a lot of old Magic is, and I really appreciate that. But let's move on to Casting of Bones. This is a common. It is an enchant creature that costs 2 and a black mana. And if enchanted creature is put into the graveyard, draw 3 cards. Choose and discard one of those cards. So this is interesting. It replaces itself and +1s you and feeds your graveyard a little bit. So there is definitely some value to be had in this. 3 mana is, I wouldn't call it a lot for this effect, but I have not personally found much value with this, specifically in limited play. Outside of that, there is so many probably better options than this, but if you are running a very specific kind of deck in Commander, this is probably pretty funny there, or at least arguably useful. Outside of that, I don't really see where you would play this. 3 mana is a lot. The effect is relatively powerful, but 3 mana is a lot, and not only is it 3 mana, but it's not just 3 mana, draw 3 cards and discard one. It's a creature has to die, and so there are hoops to jump through with this, but it's interesting. It's a unique idea. Well, maybe not super unique, but yeah, Casting of Bones is interesting. It's not awful, but there's really nothing to say about it, so we'll move on here pretty quickly. There are 2 arts for this. They were illustrated by Anson Maddox. This one is interesting. I like the fake finger the guy has on. That little detail is quite neat. I'm a fan of it. And here's the other art. This one is also nice. I like this one. I think I like this one a little bit better. but I don't really have much to say about either of these. They're not like iconic art or anything like that. They're perfectly serviceable though. All right, to Contagion. Contagion is an uncommon. It's an instant that costs 3 and 2 black mana. You may pay 1 life and remove a black card in your hand from the game instead of paying Contagion's casting cost. Effects that prevent or redirect damage cannot be used to counter this loss of life. Put 2 -2/-1 counters distributed any way you choose on any number of target creatures. On any number. Probably no more than 2 though. Contagion is very good. Obviously, it often gets overshadowed by Force of Will because why wouldn't it? But distributing 2 -2/-1 counters can be very valuable in a lot of situations. One, if it's a 2 power creature, or if there's a 2 toughness creature that you really, really want gone, you can just get it out of the game. It can't be regenerated because it's -2/-1 counters. They don't actually destroy or deal damage. You can also very easily cripple 2 things if they for some reason have 2 Hypnotic Specters out and you turn them into 0/1s, then they don't trigger their ability anymore and they're effectively neutered. So and those are just a couple examples. This is a pretty solid card. Outside of that, this is definitely a card that has fallen off to some level compared to like Force of Will, right? This card was probably much better many years ago. Force of Will is just as good, if not better, than it was. Contagion, I don't think you can really say that about it, but it is decent. I still generally run this in any commander deck with enough black to make use of a black pitch card. Assuming I care at all about interacting with people's creatures. But this is not bad. It's this is very good in limited specifically. This is probably better than Force of Will in limited specifically. Maybe that depends on your deck to some degree, and Force of Will can stop things that this can't, but this has a more open window at which point it can stop those things. So it has value there. Yeah, overall it's a solid card. I really like the design space of this. But I don't really have anything else to say about it. Contagion is a very cool card. It was illustrated by Mike Rabe, and the art's fantastic. I like it. It's just a cute little cat, glowing yellow eyes. I like it. But we will move on to Diseased Vermin. Oh boy, this is another uncommon, probably just as good as Contagion. Anyway, this is a 1/1 for 2 and a black mana. During your upkeep, Diseased Vermin deals 1 damage to a single target opponent it has previously damaged for each infection counter on Diseased Vermin. If Diseased Vermin damages a player in combat, put an infection counter on it. That's actually pretty decent. It's a 3 mana 1/1, which is pretty rough, but if you do manage to let this swing in a couple of times, if you swing in twice with this, and they don't have a way to remove it, you can just rest on your laurels and probably win. The first time you hit them, it gets an infection counter. Then during your upkeep on the next turn, you'll deal 1 damage to them. If you manage to swing in with this again, that's 2, and then you'll start dealing 2 at upkeep. 2 damage at upkeep, especially if you have any sort of other pressure going on, is very, very good. So if this hits twice, it's super worth it. If it hits once, it might still be worth it. This is pretty decent, specifically in limited. Outside of limited, it's not that great. It gets wrecked by Contagion, so it does lose to Contagion. Yeah, this is really interesting. The tracking on it is a little obtuse, but it's such a unique idea compared to like what the creatures do at the time. Usually when they have an idea that's kind of complicated and takes a lot of explaining, they're bad. They don't like play well within the game, but this plays pretty well. It's not powerful, but it helps get a game over with. If you get this down early enough and they can't do anything about it because they're a little slower deck, this really puts pressure on them. Very good for aggro, especially if you get it down early. If it comes down late, you might need to like give it flying or something for it to ever do anything, and the value of it obviously goes down because the less upkeeps this is around for, the less overall damage it did. But yeah, Disease Vermin is kind of interesting. It was illustrated by Scott Kirshner, and I guess I don't really have too much else to say about it. The art is nice. I like the art. I like that it's again, I keep saying different styles, but I really appreciate that aspect of art at this point. It's an interesting card. It's not super strong, but it's also not weak, and it's fun to try to build around this. So I appreciate that. But next we have Dystopia. This is a rare. It is an enchantment that costs 1 and 2 black mana. It has cumulative upkeep, 1 life. Once again, cumulative upkeep, that means the first upkeep you pay 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and so on and so forth. During each player's upkeep, if that player controls any green or white permanents, he or she sacrifices a green or white permanent. This is pretty solid in limited against green and white, and maybe it would be funny in commander. I don't fucking know. But yeah, this is pretty interesting. It's a rare. I don't know that I've ever actually gotten to play this against a white green deck, but I'm sure it fucking does really well there. I think it's kind of interesting. And like I've said before with the color hate in this set, I do appreciate the ones that target both enemy colors just to make them a little bit more likely to come up. This was illustrated by Ruth Thompson, and the art's very nice. I like it. I guess I don't really have much to say about this one, but it's an interesting card. Either way, let's talk about Fatal Lore. This is another rare. This is a sorcery. It costs 2 and 2 black mana. Target opponent chooses one. You draw 3 cards, or you choose and bury up to 2 target creatures that opponent controls, and he or she draws up to 3 cards. I want to say this is bad because it feels pretty bad. 4 mana is a lot for this, I think. And I don't really see a situation where your opponent wouldn't just, unless they, yeah. So this is interesting because if your opponent doesn't have any creatures, you can't play this and force them to draw you cards because they destroy up to 2. So they'll just be like, yeah, I'll draw 3 cards. But you do get to pick which creatures go. So if there are situations where your opponent will be forced to let you draw 3 cards with this. However, it's a sorcery. It's 4 mana. It's any card that lets your opponent choose is generally pretty bad, and this one is pretty bad. It is interesting. I do like the idea of this. Letting your opponent draw 3 cards is very dangerous. I guess I just really appreciate that this one makes me think a little bit, and I'm not super confident that how bad it is, because it has really powerful effects written on it. Blowing up 2 creatures is nice. Your opponent drawing 3 cards is not nice, but it is powerful. You drawing 3 cards is also pretty powerful. That's been pretty good throughout the history of the game. 4 mana for this is maybe fair. I don't know. I wouldn't run this card, to be honest, but I do appreciate that any card that says draw 3 on it is something that I have to at least consider is possibly better than I give it credit for. I don't think that's the case for this one, but it is what it is. Anyway, this was illustrated by Lawrence Snelly, and the art's very cool. It's very nice. Kind of gives me, oh man, this reminds me of another art, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. But yeah, I like it. Either way, let's move on. Feast or Famine is next. Feast or Famine is a common. It is an instant that costs 3 and a black mana, and you can bury target non-black, non-artifact creature, or put a zombie token into play. Treat this token as a 2/2 black creature. This is pretty gas in limited specifically. Outside of that, you way better options. I don't know why you'd be doing this, but this is very nice. It is 4 mana, which is kind of a lot, but if the creature costs more than 4 mana, then who gives a shit, right? But the versatility of this card is really nice, especially in limited. If there's like, if you can't remove any of their creatures, or you are really aggressive and just want another creature, you can do that. Otherwise, you can remove something. There's a lot of tempo to this card. It's nice. So it's active removal, and like it can't hit a black or a artifact creature. So if that's all they have, it's kind of, even then though, it's not necessarily a dead card because you can still make the 2/2. But this is just really, really nice and interesting. If this was 3 mana, this would be kind of a banger, I think. At 4 mana, I think it's depending on what like level of play you guys are doing, this is really good. And in limited, it's very, very good. Uh, that being said, it's just removal or a token creator, so I guess there's not really much else I have to say on this, but it is instant, so we could talk about that. You can do this during their turn. You can do this after attackers are declared if they are attacking with maybe they have a black creature that's like a 1/1 or a 2/2 that you really want gone, and you can't block it, so they swing in with it thinking it's safe. Then you can cast this and haha. So there's a lot of value to be had here. There's a lot of different ways to make this card useful to help you win a game. And cards like that are really, really awesome, even if they are maybe a little bit overcosted. Not overcosted for limited, mind you. Like in limited, I think this is a fair and even reason, like pretty good cost for this effect. And outside of limited, I'm sure you probably would never play this. It's common, so there's two arts. These were illustrated by Pete Venters, and this one is quite interesting. It's quite cool. Kind of an interesting POV. It's not my favorite, but it's all right. But then we have this art as well. This one is a little bit more brutal. I like this one a little bit better. It's a little terrifying, which I think goes good on a black card. And yeah, I don't know. I don't have much to say about it, but Feast or Famine is a genuinely interesting and useful card. Then we have Fervent Strength. This is another common. It is an instant that costs 2 and a black. Target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. Well, this is pretty useful and limited, I suppose. It replaces itself. +2/+0 can really shift around the, blocker math, and it's an instant, so you can do it after blockers are declared to get one up on somebody. This card's pretty useful and limited specifically. Outside of that, it's just grossly overcosted. Like, it replaces itself, and the effect is okay, but it's obviously not good. This card's pretty weak. Even in limited, I would, like, it's okay, but it's not, you're not getting much for the card. I mean, it does replace itself, so maybe I should say you're not getting much for the mana. Personally, in my experience, black and limited isn't super great in alliances. I usually have way better luck with like blue-white flyers, or white-green is pretty good too. Black's not awful though. Some of the removal is nice. But I guess there's not much else to say about Fervent Strength here. There are two arts for this one, and they were illustrated by Brian Schnotty. This one is well done. The dude's got some gross pustules on him. It's messed up. It's otherwise looks very, very strong. It fits the vibe of the card quite well, but it is a little unsettling, which is not a problem. It just makes the art more immersive, I guess. I don't know. But anyways, we have this art too. This one is really funny. It has the same unsettling aspects as the last one, but it just fucking look at this thing. This one brings me some joy. It's just hilarious. But yeah, that's Fevered Strength. Let's move on. Insidious Bookworm. This is another common. It is a 1/1 creature that costs 1 black mana. And you can pay 1 and a black mana, and target player discards a card at random from his or her hand. Use this ability only when Insidious Bookworms is put into the graveyard from play. You cannot spend more than 1 black in this way each turn. So this is pretty cool. Basically, if this gets blown up or killed while blocking or attacking, you can then pay 1 and a black to have them discard a card. If this comes down on turn 1, and turn 2, you can have it destroyed somehow, either by trading with them or attacking, and then you can spend the mana and ditch them a card, and then you 2-for-1 them. This can be quite good early game. It's not great. It's certainly not like, I certainly wouldn't call this constructed playable. And in limited, it's also not necessarily super valuable because card quality is so low, you're likely to hit something that wasn't going to do anything anyway. So I like the idea of this. I think it's interesting. In my experience, it's not good though. It has sat in my hand, making me very sad that it was not anything else. A lot more often than most of the cards in this set. So personally, I'm not a huge fan of this, but I really like the idea of it. I think it's a fun card. I think it's an interesting idea, and I think the flavor is amazing. So I enjoy this card a lot. I'm happy it exists in the set. And again, it's another card with like an effect that is similar to things that are around, but it has some different advantages, right? Like you could look at this like Hypnotic Spectre. This is a 1 mana, and that's a 3 mana card. This can only do it once, and it has to die, but you have to pay some mana for it. Like, this is a more balanced card and a more conservative way of doing that kind of thing, which is good. I think. Not that Hypnotic Spectre is a card that is like really powerful. The thing that makes Hypnotic Spectre powerful is Dark Ritual. Dark Ritual is the reason Hypnotic Spectre is scary and terrifying. Beyond the, like, if it comes down late, it's annoying, but it's not as big of a deal. The real issue with it is that unless you have like a swords or something like that, you will struggle to deal with it or leak aim. And by the time you can, you won't be able to because all your cards got ripped out of your hand. Insidious Bookworms is kind of going with that same thing, but without like ruining the game for somebody. And so I appreciate that. So yeah, for those reasons, I do kind of like Insidious Bookworms, but it's not good. This was it's a common, so there are 2 arts, and it was illustrated by Greg Simanson. The art's great. This is fantastic. Look at those little very insidious bookworms. Terrifying, terrifying stuff. There are 2 arts, and the other one is this one here, which is just a close-up of one of the worms in a different perspective. Personally, I like the other art more, but this one is also pretty decent. Very funny card. Alright, next we have a rare. We have Keeper of Tressorhorn. Keeper of Tressorhorn is a 6/6 that costs 5 and a black mana. If Keeper of Tressorhorn attacks and is not blocked, it deals no damage to defending player this turn, and that player loses 2 life. Effects that prevent or redirect damage cannot be used to counter this loss of life. So this is kind of interesting. A 6/6 for 6 mana is kind of above rate at the time. And so it has a downside, sort of. Like, it's mostly a downside, but the losing 2 life instead of dealing combat damage means this gets around Circle of Protections. That's kind of interesting. Not that that's a limited consideration, but whatever. It's basically saying, yeah, you can't, if you somehow manage to have this out and they don't have any blockers, you can't hit them for 6. But if they try to block this, you're going to be dealing 6 to them, so they are going to lose everything. It's interesting. I don't hate the concept of this downside. I don't think this is properly balanced. I think this card sucks, personally. But I do like the idea of the downside. Again, like I said, it's not strictly a downside. There are situations where that is beneficial. There are more situations when it being a 6/6, dealing 6 to them is going to be beneficial. So it's not an upside either. I don't know. I think that's really interesting. The card is not really that good. But it's not awful either. It does lose to a lot of the removal. Not the removal that says you can't hit a black creature, so it's safe from that, but other than that, it dies to most of it. Keeper of Tressorhorn is kind of interesting just for the like uniqueness of its mechanic, but it is not good, so I guess we'll just move on from here. This was illustrated by Zach Plukinski and D. Alexander Gregory. The art is pretty nice. I like the art a lot. It's a very formidable looking card, but it does kind of suck. So let's move on to another rare. This is Krovokian Horror. This is a 2/2 that costs 3 and a black mana. At the end of any turn, if Krovokian Horror is in your graveyard with a summoned card directly above it, you may put Krovokian Horror into your hand. And then you can pay 1, sacrifice a creature to have Krovokian Horror deal 1 damage to target creature or player. This is pretty solid, at least in the aspect of limited. Outside of limited, not so much these days. This would definitely have some value early on, especially if you are like, if you have Fallen Empires cards and you're creating a shitload of tokens, then you can deal quite a bit of damage. Being able to ping multiple things is nice. That means like it's going to be resource intensive for you, but if you sacrifice 2 creatures, pay 2 mana, you can blow up a 2/2. That's something that like Prodigal Sorcerer can't do and stuff like that. So there is quite a bit of value in the abilities of this, and the ability to just put it into play if there is a creature card specifically right above it is pretty interesting. Or you don't put it into play, you put it back into your hand. This is interesting because this is a rare that like does have some sort of impact within the limited environment, or if you have a small card pool or you're playing with not the most broken cards of all time. But outside of that, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't really impact the wider game. And I think that's a pretty interesting and cool spot for cards to be. This one is pretty fun. I like this. This was illustrated by Christopher Rush, and the art is fantastic. It's unsettling and it's bright and colorful. Uh, I like it. I think the art's really cool. It's an interesting card. And then we have Krovokian Plague. Krovokian Plague is an uncommon. It is an enchant creature that costs 2 and a black mana. You may play this on a non-wall creature you control. Draw a card at the beginning of the upkeep of the turn after Krovokian Plague comes into play. So it's a slow trip. And then you pay 0, tap enchanted creature to have Krovokian Plague deal 1 damage to target or creature. Put a -0, -1 counter on enchanted creature. Interesting. So this is a 3 mana, turn a creature into a prodigal sorcerer. But it better have a lot of toughness or you only do it a couple of times. And then it replaces itself at the next upkeep. It's not great, but in a pinch and limited, this could be pretty handy. It is not great though. This is probably one of the worst cards in the set. It's kind of interesting though. It is another card in Alliances that is definitely inspired by something, but approaches it in a unique way that has pretty distinct gameplay ramifications. Alliances is doing really well at that. There's a lot of stuff in here that is kind of effects or things that you could do before, but it's a different approach to doing it. And I think that's really neat. This was illustrated by Liz Danforth, and the art goes hard as shit. It's very unsettling in the coolest way. All right, next we have the common Lim-Dûl's Highguard. This is a 2/1 that costs 1 and 2 black mana. It has first strike, and you can pay 1 and a black to regenerate it. This card is kind of pretty fucking awesome. It is really bad in a lot of circumstances. It is a 2/1 for 3 mana. It does have first strike. This card can be really, really frustrating. If your opponent gets this out late and it is a problem for you, and they have a bunch of mana up, it might just be game over. I have like gotten my ass kicked by 1 or 2 of this little fucker coming out later into the game. And early in the game, it's pretty difficult to deal with too. It's relatively good for an aggro card too, at least in this limited. Outside of that, it's 3 mana for a 2/1 with first strike. The regeneration is really nice, but this is a pretty expensive card for what it is. But in limited, this thing is a fucking pain in the ass to deal with. Other times, it does fucking nothing. So, like, this card is either just really fucking annoying and brutal to deal with and might lose you the game, or it does absolutely nothing and it was a dead draw for your opponent. More so than most other cards in my experience in this set, it's very, like, feast or famine, I guess. There are quite a few cards that are like that, but this one is especially like that. But yeah, this is a common. There's 2 arts for it. It's a pretty interesting card. It's good and limited. Not much else to say about it anywhere else. But this was illustrated by Anson Maddox, and I like this art. This art's really fucking funny. I like the kind of goofy look on the raised card. I don't know. And the detailing on the armor is really nice too. The blood red, but it's got nicks and dinks, and it's very cool. I like it a lot. This one is probably the more common art, though. At least this is the one that I see more often. And this one is also equally good. I like this armor too, or I like this art too. It's just really interesting. It's got both arms attached on the same side, and it looks like its other arm is just a fucking chain. Does that like tie it to its guard spot? I don't know. But it's interesting. It's a card that the art makes you kind of think about it a little more, and I appreciate that. That being said, it's a pretty simple card, so we'll move on. Okay, next we have Misinformation. This is an uncommon. It is an instant. It costs 1 black mana, and you put up to 3 target cards from an opponent's graveyard on top of his or her library, in any order. So this is very similar to, I think it's called Reinforcements. It's one of the white cards in Alliances. The main difference is that targets you, so you put 3 cards of yours, and also they have to be creatures. This, you can, if they have any 3 cards in their graveyard, you can put them back onto their library. So effectively what you're doing is with this card, you basically guarantee that your opponent's next 3 draws are going to be useless to them, assuming they have 3 cards in the graveyard that are useless to them. This can be quite powerful, and in the right circumstances, this will, at the very least, it will give you a lot of information on the next 3 cards they're going to draw. So late game, this is actually fairly valuable if you have it, but it is also a little bit win more. So this is really good specifically when you have like control of the game. If you don't have control of the game, this can help, but it's less likely that you'll be able to actualize the value. That being said, the art is very nice. This was illustrated by Richard Kane Ferguson. He does great work. And I really like this one. I really like the little details he puts into like the swords and the armor and the weapons. It's a nice touch. But that's really all there is here. So let's move on to Phantasmal Fiend. Phantasmal Fiend is a common 1/5 that costs 3 and a black mana. You can pay a black mana to give it +1/-1 until end of turn, and you can pay 1 and a blue to switch Phantasmal Fiend's power and toughness until end of turn. Effects that alter Phantasmal Fiend's power alter its toughness instead, and vice versa. Very funny way to word all of that, but this is pretty okay. This is pretty neat. This is, again, not really good outside of Limited, and even in Limited, I've found its usefulness to be meh, kind of. Blue-black, in my experience, isn't super great, specifically in this Limited. It's not terrible. There's definitely synergies to be had there, but the synergies are a little bit weaker and a little bit more, I want to say less consistent, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. But I like this card. I think this card is interesting. It's a cool idea and fairly reasonable given creatures at the time. The one thing you can say about alliances is that there are a lot of unique creatures, despite there not really being any keywords or anything like that. They really, really did a good job of like expanding the design space in so many directions, and Phantasmal Fiend is just another example of that. Not a super strong card by any means, but it definitely can be annoying to when they have one. But I guess that's really all I have on this one. This is a common, so there's 2 art, illustrated by Scott Kirschner, and this one is great. I like this one a lot. It's very, very, I guess abstract is the word I'm looking for. Like, it's not really abstract, but it has kind of abstract vibes, I guess is what I'm looking for. I don't know. I like it. But there's another one, and that other one is this. This one is very, very, very funny. One, I like that it is implying that this creature has some sort of chameleon ability or is not entirely corporeal. That's pretty funny. Pretty fucking cool. The hoofs are just wild. This art is great. I like the art. I think this is great. But let's skedaddle on, shall we? Next up, we have Phyrexian Boon. This is another common. It is an enchant creature that costs 2 and a black. As long as enchanted creature is black, it gets +2/+1. Otherwise, it gets -1/-2. So this is very interesting. It's kind of a play at Unholy Strength, but it's more versatile. 3 mana for this effect is a lot. In Limited, this can be potentially useful. Dealing -1/-2 to any creature is going to be great, especially if it just takes that creature out. So this card can functionally act as removal or aggressive power, I guess. 3 mana is a lot for this, though. I don't think this card is particularly good outside of Limited, and even in Limited, there are situations where it's awkward because if they have if they are also in black, this still has value, but it has significantly less value. Honestly, not a terrible card, specifically in Limited. Outside of that, it's pretty bad. If this card costs 1 mana, it would be really fucking sick. But 3 mana is a lot. 2 mana is probably fair, but I think 1 mana would be justifiable. Either way, Uh, this is a common, so there's two arts for it. This was illustrated by Mark Tadine, and it's fantastic. I really like this art. It's very cool, very classic Tadine style. But we also have this one. And this one is quite fantastic as well. Again, neither of these arts are particularly iconic. They are nowhere near Tadine's best work, but they are perfectly serviceable. I enjoy looking at them. So let's continue on. All right, next we have Ritual of the Machine. This is a rare, costs 2 and 2 black mana. Sacrifice a creature to gain control of target non-black, non-artifact creature. This is not a bad card, but it's hard to look at this card and be like, hell yeah, when control magic exists. That being said, like they've been down powering for a long time, and this card is not bad. Control magic is a little rough. Control magic's an uncommon. This is a rare, so it's less of the experience. And you do it can't target just anything, and you have to sack a creature for it. This is still sick as fucking limited, specifically. It's definitely worth playing in limited. This is maybe okay in Commander, depending on what you're doing. Um, it's certainly not super, super powerful, but you can just ruin someone's day with Ritual of the Machine, which is pretty funny. There's definitely synergies to be had. I would call it a pretty balanced card, all things considered. It's very impactful and limited if you use it at the correct time. But it's certainly not like a broken or super exciting card to talk about. There really isn't much here to say. It's just a control magic, but I mean, there are benefits. This is not strictly worse than control magic, is another thing to point out, I suppose, because this is a sorcery. Like control magic, you can always remove the control magic to get it back. You can't do that with this, so it does have upsides to control magic. But yeah, I guess that's all I have on Ritual of the Machine. It's an interesting and pretty cool card. It was illustrated by Anson Maddox, and the art is nice. I don't really have anything particular to say about it, but the art's pretty cool. All right, next we have Soldevi Adnate. I'm not exactly sure what word that is. Anyway, this is a common. It is a 1/2 creature that costs 1 and a black, and you can tap it, sacrifice a black or artifact creature to add an amount of black equal to that creature's casting cost to your mana pool. Play this ability as an interrupt. So this is pretty interesting. It's very much sort of a slightly different Priest of Yawgmoth. Priest of Yawgmoth, I I think it's just sack an artifact. I don't think it has to be an artifact creature. It might have to be an artifact creature, but I'm pretty sure it's just sack an artifact. This is sack a black or artifact creature. So they are slightly different, but they are very much basically the same card. And neither one of them have ever really done anything as far as I know. I like them both a lot. Priest of Yawgmoth is one of my favorite, well, maybe not one of my favorite cards, but it is a card that I always read and I'm like, man, this feels so good. Why is it never great? Soldevi Adnate feels even better, personally. Obviously, there are situations where one would be better than the other, and there are situations where you could run both of them. They are very, very similar cards. But yeah, this is very cool. It's very interesting. It is just a classic reference. It's not as inspired as a lot of these designs, but they don't all have to be. I really appreciate this. It's sort of like a reprint, but sort of not. It's very, very cool. Obviously, like the main thing you would probably try to do with either of these is just massive drain lives. This one is nice because you can sack a big creature just to get the mana needed to finish them off with a drain life or something like that, or even a fireball if you're in red. So there are cool and interesting things you can do with it. In limited, there are some stuff that you can do with it. You can just use it as basic ramp to ramp out something a little bit bigger. But there are no like fireballs or drain lives specifically in this card pool. I don't know. It's a very interesting card. I like it a lot. It's not particularly good, but I think it's a well-designed card. As I said, it was a common, so there's two arts. These were illustrated by Christopher Rush. This one is pretty decent. And this one is also pretty decent. I think I prefer the first one. I guess I don't really have an opinion. They're both fine to me. I could take or leave either one of them. The art's not bad, but it's certainly not Chris's best work by any means. But let's talk about Stench of Decay. Stench of Decay is a common. It is an instant that costs 1 and 2 black mana, and all non-artifact creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. This is a pretty powerful effect. 3 mana is kind of the upper echelon of like what you would call playable for something like this. Maybe you do it for 4 mana in limited, depending on what else is going on. And I don't, and this isn't like good enough to play in most constructed. This would be perfectly fine in Commander, especially if you built around it, because anyone that's creating 1/1 or 0/1 tokens, those just get wiped. And there's not much they can do about it other than countering this. And since it is -1/-1, instead of dealing damage or destroying or anything like that, it gets around regeneration, which is not as huge of a deal these days since they don't do regeneration that often, but it does still show up in Commander from time to time. I might be overhyping this a little bit. Specifically in Limited, I am usually pretty excited to get a couple of copies of this just because I'm like, man, it's going to just fucking wipe all their 1/1s. And then I'll run up against someone playing only 2/2s, why I also have 1/1s because I'm bad at deck building. um this can be, it's hard for this to find value in my opinion, at least in limited. There's definitely situations where it can, but this is more of like a constructed sideboard card, or at least it would be if it was good enough for most constructed, which I don't think it is. um Still, it's a pretty powerful effect, especially since it is an instant. You can like just swing in with your stuff and have them trade in a way that, you know, all of their stuff ends up at 1 because they're like, haha, and then you play this, and then it's effectively a Wrath of God at that point. So that's not to say that you can't do things with this. In my experience, it comes up a lot less often than you would think looking at the effect, at least in limited. Anyways, it's a common. There's 2 arts for it. This was illustrated by Heather Hudson. She did great job with this. This one is unsettling in the best way, very sad. This one is pretty all right. It's also very evocative, I guess, of the emotion that you would probably be feeling around this kind of thing. Yeah, the art's well done. But let's move on, I guess, to Stromgald Spy. This is an uncommon. It is a 2/4 that costs 3 and a black. If Stromgald Spy attacks and is not blocked, you may choose to have it deal no combat damage to defending player this turn. If you do, defending player must play with his or her hand face up on the table until Stromgald Spy leaves play. Well, that's not anything. This card sucks. um, Having the additional information of what's in your opponent's hand can certainly be valuable, especially if you know the card pool and know what everything does and are experienced with the game. But personally, I think I'd rather just deal the 2 damage, get the game over with. Any situation where this is going to be valuable is a situation where you would not be playing a 2/4 for 4 mana. I think this one's pretty stupid, personally. It's okay, I guess. No, it's not. I don't like this one. One, they did this specific effect where, like, if you attack, you can choose not to deal damage to get some sort of effect all the fucking time. There are so many of these fucking cards in, like, the last 4 sets they've released, and one, I'm getting a little sick of them. Most of them are not all that strong, and this one really is not. So we'll just move on. I don't have much else to say about it. This card is genuinely pretty bad, but it is really the only black card we've talked about where I'm like, there's no value to this at all, which is definitely not a bad rate. So like Alliance black cards have been pretty cool, despite being maybe the weakest cards in the set. We'll get back to that. They're not awful, but they are certainly not incredibly good. This was illustrated by Zach Plukinski, and the art is nice. I like it a lot. I don't really have much to say on it, so let's just move on. We only have 1 more card left, so let's get her done. All right, next we have Swamp Mosquito. Yeah. Swamp Mosquito is a common. It is a 0/1 that costs 1 and a black. It is flying, and if Swamp Mosquito attacks and is not blocked, defending player gets a poison counter. If a player has 10 or more poison counters, he or she loses the game. So basically this is effectively a 2/1, you could argue, but it's obviously not quite the same. Like if you have this and another 2/2, it's effectively not having 2/2/2s because this isn't actually dealing damage, this is dealing a poison counter. So if you manage to, this is a common, so you can get a few of them. In my experience with limited, this is not really worth it because you are going to maybe draw 1 or 2 of them. it's probably going to get removed before you get all 10 counters, and if it does, it did nothing. It can't really, I mean, it can chump block, but it's just, it's getting sacrificed, so you generally don't want to do that. Like, it's not trading with anything. Swamp Mosquito is, in limited, pretty bad, in my experience. Outside of that, where you can build a deck around poison, this is pretty fucking sweet. It's a poison creature that comes down early, it's flying, and you can be pretty aggressive with this. Specifically in like kitchen table-y or old school constructed where this is legal, it's still going to be a bad deck because poison isn't super supportive and you're going to be playing against like Force of Will and shit. But in the right environment, this is actually a pretty sweet card. The environment it is in is not the right environment for it, in my opinion. But it is not a bad card. It just is not likely to... it's the only poison creature I'm pretty sure in this entire set. So in limited, it's not really going to do anything. Unless maybe you get like 2 or 3 of them. You might win a game with poison, assuming they can't deal with it, which can certainly happen. But in most cases, this isn't gonna do anything, especially if your opponent grabbed any of the multitude of flyers that are in this set. That's all I have. I like Swamp Mosquito. I think it's a great design. I think it's a cool card, and I mean, I would say it's probably fine as making this a 1-mana card even, but I can see why they went with 2 mana, especially since most 1/1 flyers are 2 mana at the time. Swamp Mosquito is a great card to end on. The black cards are really good, but let's talk about the art before we finish up here. Swamp Mosquito is a common. There's 2 arts for it. It was illustrated by Nicola Leonard. This one is fantastic, super well detailed. That's a fucking mosquito, and it's in a swamp. We know what's going on. Well done. Love it. This art is way more funny because we're looking at its face, and its face is goofy as fuck. But once again, it is a mosquito. It's in a swamp. Super easy to understand what we're doing here. But yeah, those are the black cards. Interestingly, the black cards and alliances are not super great. Other than Contagion, I don't even know what you would consider something worth playing in Constructed, especially today. Swamp Mosquito, if you're trying to do some sort of poison thing, I could argue it may be valuable, but again, not at like high power. There are a lot of cards in the black cards that are very interesting to read and interesting to think about. Like Balduvian Dead is such a unique idea at the time, so that's really, really cool. Limdul's Guard is pretty good and limited, I guess. But beyond that, I guess Ritual of the Machine is also a relatively playable card compared to the card pool at the time. And I guess Krovokian Horror is a really interesting idea too. The black cards are not really that good in this set, which is okay. They don't really need to be, I guess. There's a lot of good black cards that existed before this set, and some of these are pretty decent at being supplemental, but most of them you would not play if you were playing with the full card pool. But I guess you could really say that about a lot of cards that are coming out in these sets. We're getting to the point where, you know, there's enough busted as fuck cards that if you were playing with everything, you wouldn't need to look at any of these. So I guess that's not really a knock on black. But I guess that's all I really have for the black cards today. They are okay. They are not great, but they are interesting, and I enjoy looking through them, which I think is way more important than them pushing how strong Magic is. You can only do that for so long, right? But that's all I have today.